You've heard me talk incessantly, especially on my Money News articles, about the importance of energy independence in this country. And a big part of that energy independence is happening right in the middle of our country. You've heard me talk about the importance of the Keystone Pipeline, how important fracking is. I want you to take a listen to this very short clip that appeared on Meet the Press. And I think finally the Democrats are getting it. Let's go to that cut right now. That was cut 12.
There are things that can be done outside of what Congress has to do. For one, I'm a firm believer. Approve the Keystone Pipeline. Let's create jobs and create tax revenue for the various states who will be touched by the construction of this.
That's a
You'll
game
create
changer.
higher paying jobs. You'll create greater tax revenue.
Energy independence is critical, and the transport of energy is really critical as well. Keystone is a big part of that. Very interesting article that took place in the last couple of days. Prince Alawid of Saudi Arabia is saying that they are frightened, actually terrified, of how well fracking is doing in the U.S. They could lose their biggest customer. Should we care? I don't think so, but let's find out. Let's talk to Elliott Gue. He's founder of the Energy and Income Advisor, and his newsletter is all about getting income out of energy. Elliott, thank you so much for calling in.
Oh, thanks for having me on the show.
Elliott, I'm not sure if you had a chance to read that article, but it seems that Saudi Arabia is concerned about it. So if they're concerned about it, doesn't it seem like we're doing something right?
Absolutely, and I think they have good reason to be concerned about that. I mean, if you look at the amount of production that's coming out of some of these shale plays in the U.S., for example, the Bakken Shale in North Dakota, just the sheer volume of oil that's coming out of that play. And what's, I think, happened in the last six months or so is we've seen a number of pipelines open up. For example, the Seaway pipeline from Cushing, Oklahoma, down to the Gulf Coast, and a lot of that oil from the center of the country is finally making its way down to the U.S. Gulf Coast, where most of our refining capacity is. And you know, right now, we're only importing about 100,000 barrels a day of light sweet crude oil into the U.S. Gulf Coast.
100,000?
A few years ago, just 100,000 barrels a day. And by the end of this year, on the recent conference call just a few days ago from Valero, which is the largest independent refiner in the U.S., they feel that by the end of this year, the U.S. will actually be no longer importing light sweet crude oil into the Gulf of Mexico region.
Elliott, let me
tremendous.
stop you right there for a second, because I want to understand this, and I want our viewers to understand this. To have a frame of reference, if we're importing 100,000 now, and we may not even need to do that, say perhaps in a few years, where were we, say, 5-10 years ago?
Right. Well, I mean, you know, the key thing is to look at the type of crude that's coming in. So a lot of the oil that used to be imported into the Gulf of Mexico region was light sweet crude oil, and a lot of that did come from places like Saudi Arabia, and the reason the light sweet crude oil is low in sulfur content and it's very easy to refine. But the thing is, a lot of the oil that we're producing domestically here in the United States is also light sweet crude oil. So a lot of the crude oil coming out of places like the Bakken and the Eagle Ford is light sweet crude oil, and now that that's finding its way to the Gulf, it's actually displacing all of those imports. So really all we're importing into the Gulf of Mexico region is a little bit of light sweet, which, as I said, by the end of this year, it's probably going to be down to nil, down from well over 1 million barrels a day just a few years ago. And we're going to be importing some heavy crude oils, but that typically comes from places like Mexico or piped in from Canada, as well as places like Venezuela. So we're not really getting that from the Middle East either.
You know, we hear that term,
really
Elliott, we hear that term all the time. I want to understand that. You know, we hear the term light sweet crude. Here's what I don't understand about the world of refining and why some crudes are desirable, some are high sulfur, some are low sulfur. But in the end, after it's refined and it ends up as gasoline or heating oil, isn't it all the same anyway?
It is all the same. The key issue there is that you have hundreds of different types of crude oil that are widely traded around the world. One of the problems that the U.S. has faced is the fact that our refineries here in the United States, for example in the Houston area, are set up to blend a mixture of light sweet crude oil and heavy crude oils. Now, if they don't have the right mix, they're just not optimized. They can't output quite as much gasoline or yield quite as much distillate, which is another word for diesel, as they can if they have that optimal mix. So what's actually happened over the last 6 or 8 months is that we have a little bit too much light sweet crude oil finding its way to the Gulf, and not enough of the heavy sour kind. So, although in the end it's all the same, it all becomes gasoline, which is identical whether it's refined from heavy sour or light sweet.
But all of this, Elliott, and I hate to cut you off because I want to get this in before the break. All of this depends on having, a good energy policy, and I think a lot of Americans would like to see the United States become energy independent. When you look at what the administration is doing right now, and some of the efforts you heard in that clip that former Congressman Ford, he's for the Keystone Pipeline. I still don't see the signature by the president on this legislation. Do you think this administration is doing the right things for energy in this country today?
Well, no. I mean, I think obviously we could do a lot better if we had better energy infrastructure to move all this oil that's being produced in places that haven't traditionally been big crude oil producers like North Dakota. It could be much cheaper to move that oil down to the Gulf Coast than it is right now, and we could benefit from even lower energy prices. What we're seeing is a lot of the producers are getting around that problem by using things like rail. Now, using rail to transport oil is faster because it doesn't take as long to set up that as it does to set up a brand new pipeline.
I understand that. I understand that, Elliott. I really want to, have you back again soon because I want to get into this information further. But we're going to have to leave it right there. Thanks so much for joining. You're listening to the Steve Malzberg Show.